Each morning, before the noise of the world begins, you stand at the threshold between who you have been and who you might yet become. The day seems ordinary, but within it lies the entire pattern of your destiny, repeated thoughts, small choices, the unseen habits that weave the fabric of your life. You imagine that great change will come from great moments, but transformation is never loud. It begins with 7 quiet obediences. You must master your attention, for what you look at becomes your world. You must master your speech, for every word is a seed you plant in the soil of your own soul. You must master your emotion, not by repression, but by awareness, seeing each feeling as a messenger from the depths. You must master your shadow, for what you refuse to face within yourself will rise against you in others. You must master your relationships, learning to see not just people, but mirrors, each revealing the part of you still unlived. You must master your solitude, for without it, your voice is only an echo of the crowd. And finally, you must master your faith not in doctrines or promises, but in the meaning that whispers beneath chaos, in the invisible order that guides your becoming. Do these 7 things daily, not perfectly, but consciously. Each act of mastery, no matter how small, draws you closer to the self, the inner wholeness that waits behind every conflict. One day you will look back and realize that enlightenment did not arrive as thunder, but as 7 quiet steps repeated each morning until you and your life became the same thing. Each morning when I wake, I notice how easily the mind begins to wander like a child chasing shadows across a wall. Attention, I have learned, is the first act of the soul. It is the quiet choice between drifting and awakening. What we choose to see shapes what we become. Every life is formed, not by events, but by the gaze that meets them. Most people imagine attention to be simple, yet it is the hardest of all disciplines. To see truly means to stop running. The eyes are quick, but the heart is slow. The outer world floods us with forms, faces, noises, demands, and we mistake seeing for understanding. But true seeing begins within. What one refuses to face inside, one will never perceive clearly outside. The man who cannot hold his gaze upon his own thoughts will live as a stranger to himself. He will seek constant novelty to escape what is near. But the psyche is patient. It waits. When we avoid the inner life, it withdraws like a shy animal. It returns only when we are still enough to listen. That stillness is attention, the soul's listening posture. I have often compared the mind to a mirror. When disturbed, it distorts what it reflects. But when calm, it shows things as they are. Attention is the act of polishing this mirror each morning, clearing it of yesterday's dust. In that clarity, the world becomes radiant again. The familiar regains its mystery. Even the smallest thing, a cup, a leaf, a sound, begins to speak. To attend deeply is to honor what one observes. The world senses when it is seen. When the child, the animal, the flower feels our full regard, something invisible answers us. The psyche of the world awakens to our gaze. This mutual recognition of soul meeting soul is the beginning of meaning. We often think meaning must be created, yet meaning arises wherever attention falls with sincerity. What we look upon with presence reveals its inner form. The neglected becomes beautiful, the ordinary becomes holy. It is not the thing that changes, but the depth of our seeing. Attention, therefore, is not a tool, it is love made visible. Each morning offers a choice, to see or to drift. The unobserved day passes like smoke. The observed day becomes eternity folded into hours. I have found that those who live without attention grow weary of life itself, while those who look deeply never run out of wonder. To attend is to participate in creation. Attention gathers the fragments of the psyche into a single flame. It is the light by which the unconscious becomes visible. When one truly observes without judgment, without haste, even inner chaos begins to order itself. Dreams, thoughts, emotions all start to align around the center of awareness. This is the beginning of consciousness, the moment the soul recognizes itself. If we lose this discipline, life scatters us. We move through days like sleepwalkers, blind to what we touch, deaf to what we feel. The unconscious then rules in secret, shaping destiny without our knowledge. But when we awaken, even briefly, we reclaim our participation in the mystery of being. I often tell my students, to master attention is to light a candle in a vast cave. You cannot illuminate everything, but you can see what is near, and when you see it, it changes. The unconscious responds to attention as a flower responds to sunlight. It unfolds, revealing patterns and meanings that were hidden. So each morning before I speak or act, I pause. I let my gaze settle upon something simple, a tree, a shadow, a sound of water. I let the world return to me. This small act draws my wandering soul back into the present. For attention is not only looking outward, it is remembering that one exists. This is why I say, what we look at becomes our world. The man who sees only fault and noise will live in fault and noise. The one who sees order, mystery, and depth will live in a world alive with meaning. Attention is destiny made visible, the sculptor of experience. To live consciously is to live reverently. To pay attention is to participate in the divine act of creation, for the world awakens through our gaze. The day that begins in awareness becomes a life that ends in wisdom. So, before all else, attend. Look, see, and the soul will begin to speak. After the act of seeing comes the act of speaking. Words are not mere breath, they are vessels of spirit. Each one carries a seed of creation, a shaping force that moves silently through the world long after it is spoken. Many think speech is light, but I have found it to be heavy as stone laid upon the foundations of fate. I learned long ago that every word, even those whispered in jest, falls into the soil of the unconscious. There, unseen, it takes root. If it is a word of truth, it grows upward like a clear flame. If it is a word of deceit or hatred, it spreads downward like a weed, choking the finer growth of the soul. Nothing we say is ever lost. Words live longer than we do. We must therefore learn to speak as if each word were an oath. Most people speak to fill the silence, not to illuminate it. They forget that silence is sacred. To speak without necessity is to scatter the energy of the soul into dust, but to speak with awareness is to breathe order into chaos. Every sentence can be either spell or prayer. When a man learns to listen to his own speech, he begins to hear the hidden motives within it. In every careless remark, he discovers his pride. In every judgment, his fear. In every flattery, his need for approval. The tongue is a mirror of the heart. It reveals more faithfully than thought what one truly serves. I have seen relationships shattered, not by great betrayals, but by small and unguarded words. A careless phrase can wound the soul more deeply than a sword. The unconscious hears every syllable. What we tell another, we tell ourselves. What we curse in another, we curse within. Thus, speech is not merely communication, it is communion. It binds or divides souls. There is power even in words left unspoken. Silence, held with intent, gathers meaning. In that hush, the psyche rearranges itself. A man who can remain silent when others rage becomes a vessel of gravity. His stillness speaks louder than arguments. The soul respects restraint, for restraint is a sign of strength. Speech born from awareness has a strange beauty. It is simple, deliberate, and alive. Such words carry warmth, like a fire that draws others close but does not burn. To speak this way, one must first listen inwardly. The true word does not come from the lips, but from the depth where thought and feeling meet. When these two agree, the word is whole. A wise man speaks little because he has learned that every utterance shapes his inner world. Each word must pass through the filter of truth. Not factual truth, but the deeper truth that comes from alignment with the self, the invisible order within. When we speak from this center, even the smallest phrase carries weight, for it echoes eternity. I have often said that words are like arrows. Once released, they cannot be recalled. The moment they leave the tongue, they strike either healing or harm. Many later regret what they said, but remorse does not erase the wound. The psyche remembers tone more than meaning. Harshness lingers in memory like cold iron. A word of kindness, however, remains warm for years. In analysis, I have witnessed how a single word spoken at the right moment can turn the course of a life. One woman, lost in grief, once told me she no longer believed in meaning. I did not argue. I simply said, Meaning has not left you. You have turned your face away. That word did not heal her at once, but months later she wrote, "The sentence would not leave me. It began to grow." This is the mystery of language. It enters the psyche like rain into soil. We cannot command what grows, but we can choose what we plant. Thus, daily mastery of speech means to speak less, but with greater care. It means to weigh words before they leave the lips, to ask, does this word reveal or conceal truth? The man who disciplines his speech will find his thoughts becoming clear, for speech is thought made flesh. When words are pure, thinking follows their order. In this way, the mastery of speech becomes the mastery of mind itself. Yet, we must not confuse truthful speech with cruelty. Many who pride themselves on being honest simply enjoy wounding others under the guise of virtue. Real truth has gentleness in it, for it springs from understanding, not judgment. When one sees clearly, compassion naturally softens the voice. Equally dangerous is speech that flatters or manipulates. Such words come from the desire to control rather than connect. They may achieve their aim for a moment, but the psyche, that secret witness, records the deceit. Sooner or later, life reflects it back through misunderstanding, loneliness, or mistrust. The soul cannot live long in falsehood. There are times when silence carries more truth than words. When love falters or grief overwhelms, the quiet presence of another often heals more deeply than any advice. Silence allows the other's soul to breathe. It gives space for what is hidden to emerge. In this sense, silence is not the absence of communication, it is its highest form. In my youth, I spoke often and too quickly. I thought words could capture the soul. But as I grew older, I saw that words are only symbols, useful, yet limited. They point toward truth, but never contain it. The wise use words like lanterns, not to explain everything, but to light the way just enough for the next step. The daily mastery of speech requires humility to know when to speak and when to be still. There is a time to name things and a time to let them remain unnamed. The soul, too, needs silence to dream. Those who never stop speaking rob themselves of their own inner music. I often remind myself, say only what you would wish to become true. For every word spoken is a kind of prophecy. The future listens. Therefore, speech is not merely a reflection of the soul. It is its extension into time. So, let speech become ritual. Let each word be weighed like gold, each silence held like prayer. Speak only when speech deepens understanding. Remain silent when it would only fill the air. In this way, even the simplest conversation becomes an act of creation, for what we say each day becomes the voice of our destiny, and destiny in the end is only the echo of what we have dared to speak. To master speech, then, is to master manifestation, not in the vulgar sense of desire, but in the sacred sense of truth becoming visible through word. If the first mastery, attention, teaches us to see, the second, speech, teaches us to shape what we see. Vision without language is dream. Language without vision is noise. Together they form the bridge between inner life and outer world. Each morning, before I speak to others, I listen within. I wait until the heart and the mind agree. Only then does my word become whole. For a word divided from the soul is like a branch cut from its tree. It withers quickly. But a word born of inner unity lives on, carrying the scent of truth long after the voice is silent. Thus, I end where I began. Speech is sacred. Use it as one uses fire, with reverence, with caution, with love. It can burn or warm, destroy or illumine. Master it daily, and your life will begin to take the shape of your own highest word. Every soul is moved by tides unseen. We imagine that we think our way through life, but in truth, we feel our way through it. The heart stirs first, the mind follows after, weaving its reasons around what the feeling has already chosen. This is why to master emotion is not to suppress it, but to understand it, to read its symbols, to hear its quiet speech. In my long work with men and women, I have found that the greatest suffering does not come from emotion itself, but from the refusal to feel it. What is denied does not die, it hides. It waits in the depths, growing darker, until it bursts forth in strange forms: sudden anger, sickness, despair, without cause. The psyche demands that its life be lived. To repress emotion is to turn away from one's own truth. Emotion is not an intruder, it is a messenger. Each feeling bears a story, a message from the unconscious to consciousness. Joy says, "You are aligned with life." Fear says, "You have stepped too far from safety." Anger says, "A boundary has been crossed." Grief says, "You have loved." When we learn to listen, the emotions guide us toward understanding. But most people are afraid of feeling. They call emotion weakness, and so they tighten themselves against it. They prefer the dry safety of reason to the living risk of the heart. Yet what they call strength is often merely numbness. The man who cannot weep cannot see. The woman who cannot rage cannot protect what she loves. Without emotion, we are shadows pretending to be alive. I once compared emotion to water. It flows where it will, seeks the lowest places, wears down even stone. One can build a dam against it, but the water will find its cracks. In time, it will rise again, often in unexpected floods. To live well is to learn the art of the river, to let feeling move, yet not to be swept away by it. To be swept away is easy. To watch the wave rise and fall without drowning requires the quiet center of awareness. When I feel anger, I do not ask whether it is good or bad. I ask, what are you trying to show me? Anger may point to humiliation, fear to longing, jealousy to unspoken desire. The emotion is the surface wave. The meaning lies in the deep. In dreams, emotion is often the first thing we remember. A strange fear, a deep sadness, a rush of joy without reason. The image may fade, but the feeling remains. This shows that emotion belongs to the oldest layer of the soul, the part untouched by reason or time. To honor it is to honor our animal nature, our kinship with all living things that feel before they think. When emotion is met with awareness, it changes its nature. The fire of anger becomes the warmth of strength. The chill of fear becomes alertness. The ache of grief becomes tenderness. Every feeling, when allowed to be felt fully, transforms into insight. But when resisted, it hardens into bitterness. The choice is not whether we will feel, but whether we will listen. The man who learns to listen to his heart finds that his thinking becomes wiser. Thought without feeling is brittle. Feeling without thought is blind. The two must join, as day joins with night, to make the full circle of the soul. When reason bows to the rhythm of feeling, and feeling opens itself to reason's light, harmony appears. This harmony is the beginning of wisdom. I have known those who fear that feeling too deeply will break them. They say, "If I begin to cry, I will never stop." But tears, once shed, know when to end. Emotion, when lived consciously, finishes its own story. It does not stay forever. It moves through like weather across the sky. The storm passes because its message has been heard. Children understand this better than adults. They weep freely, then return to laughter as if nothing happened. The adult learns shame, the false belief that to feel is to fail. Thus he builds walls against his own life, but the price of that wall is vitality. The man who feels nothing may survive, but he does not live. I often tell my students, emotions are not obstacles on the path, they are the path. Each emotion is a gate. To pass through fear is to find courage. To pass through sorrow is to find compassion. To pass through anger is to find clarity. To pass through love is to find unity. The one who walks through these gates consciously becomes whole. The alchemists knew this secret long before psychology. They spoke of the heart's fire as the agent of transformation. Without heat, no metal can change form. Without feeling, no soul can grow. The heart must burn so that the lead of our habits becomes the gold of awareness. Emotion is that sacred fire, dangerous, yes, but holy. To master emotion does not mean to extinguish it, but to contain it as one contains flame in a lamp. The lamp does not fear the fire, it gives it shape. In this way, emotion becomes creative instead of destructive. The artist paints from passion, the lover forgives from tenderness, the parent teaches from care. Each of these is emotion transformed into life. But beware the opposite. To indulge emotion without reflection is to drown in it. One must feel deeply, but also observe. The feeling is the wave, the awareness is the shore. Together they form rhythm. Without awareness, the tide sweeps us into despair or ecstasy that cannot last. Without feeling, the shore becomes desert. Both are needed: motion and stillness, passion and clarity. Many people live at the mercy of moods. They believe they are ruled by what they feel, not realizing that awareness itself is larger than emotion. The self, that inner wholeness, contains every feeling but is not contained by any. To rest in that center is to feel fully without losing balance. The emotion becomes music passing through a vast hall, echoing, beautiful and gone. I recall once, in the midst of deep sorrow, feeling suddenly that the grief itself was alive, as if some ancient part of my soul was speaking in the language of tears. I did not resist. I listened. And from that grief came understanding that sorrow too is an organ of perception. Through it I saw the invisible threads binding all beings together. Emotion, lived consciously, teaches empathy. The man who has suffered understands the suffering of others without needing words. The woman who has wept knows when another's silence hides pain. This is how feeling becomes bridge, the link between isolated souls. In this way, the heart, once wounded, becomes healer. Do not seek to destroy what you feel. Seek instead to name it honestly. To name an emotion is to give it form, and form gives freedom. A feeling unspoken rules us. A feeling understood serves us. The unconscious becomes conscious the moment it is named. Thus, each morning, I sit for a moment and ask, what lives in me today? Sometimes I find anger, sometimes joy, sometimes weariness. I greet each like an old friend. Ah, you again, I say. What have you come to teach me now? In this simple practice, I make peace with my own nature. To master emotion is to recognize that feeling is not enemy but companion. It is the pulse of the soul, the reminder that we are alive, that life still moves through us. Without it, we would be machines. With it, we are human. Emotion connects the finite with the infinite, the trembling of the heart with the vastness of existence. So let yourself feel, but do not be ruled. Observe the flame without fear. Let it burn cleanly. Let it give light. The one who walks through his emotions consciously becomes calm, not because he has no storms, but because he has learned to navigate them. Emotion, understood, becomes art. And in the quiet after feeling passes, something clearer always remains: the voice of the soul, speaking softly, saying, now you know why you live. Every man believes he knows himself, yet there walks beside him another he does not know. This unseen companion I have called the shadow. It is everything he refuses to be, everything he denies, everything that frightens him in others. To master oneself is impossible without first meeting this silent twin. Until that meeting, no peace is lasting, no virtue complete. The shadow is not a stranger. It is your own face seen from the dark. It hides in the corners of dreams, in sudden jealousy, in the sharp word that escapes before thought. When you feel unjustly provoked, when you despise in another what you secretly fear in yourself, the shadow is speaking. It shows itself through emotion before it dares to speak through reason. In every life there comes a moment when one must turn and face it. Often this happens after loss, humiliation, or failure, those experiences that crack the mask of pride. The shadow slips through the crack, demanding recognition. If ignored, it acts in secret, manipulating fate from behind the curtain. It creates conflicts, sabotages peace, draws us toward those who mirror our hidden flaws. The man who calls himself good without reservation is the most dangerous of all, for he is blind to his darkness. His morality becomes cruelty, his certainty becomes tyranny. True goodness is born from the marriage of light and shadow. It is not purity but balance, the acceptance that every virtue has its opposite and that wholeness requires both. The shadow, when unacknowledged, divides us from the world. It makes us judge others for the sins we have not forgiven in ourselves. We call others lazy, proud, or weak, not seeing that our words reveal our own fears. In this way, we fight battles outside that belong within. To see this is painful, but pain is the price of consciousness. In my work, I often asked a patient, "What do you most despise in others?" Their answer was the key to their shadow. What one hates reveals what one hides. A man who scorns weakness fears dependence. A woman who mocks ambition fears her own desire for power. What we reject, we become bound to, for the soul insists that nothing within it be denied forever. To meet the shadow requires courage, for it is not gentle. It is ancient and raw, born from all that civilization has tamed. It speaks in the language of instinct, in images of blood and fire, hunger and fear. When we encounter it, we feel shame, and shame blinds us. Yet if we can endure that shame without turning away, a strange light begins to shine. For in the shadow lies not only darkness but buried life. It holds our creativity, our passion, our spontaneity, everything we repress to appear good. The shadow carries both our demons and our unlived angels. To reclaim it is to become whole. To deny it is to remain half alive. I once dreamt that I stood before a vast cave. From it came sounds of weeping and laughter mixed together. When I entered, I found myself surrounded by figures, some noble, some grotesque, all bearing my face. They reached toward me not to harm, but to be seen. I understood then that they were the fragments of my own being, cast away by fear. To embrace them was to recover myself. In myth, this journey is everywhere. Christ descends into hell before resurrection. Orpheus ventures into the underworld for his beloved. Every hero, before he finds the treasure, must face the dragon that guards it. The dragon is the shadow, the guardian of all that is real. It tests whether we are ready to receive our own depth. We cannot destroy the shadow. We can only integrate it. This means to give it a name, a place, and a voice in consciousness. When anger arises, we say, "I see you." When envy stirs, we say, "You too belong." When fear whispers, we listen. This simple act transforms poison into medicine. The shadow loses its power the moment it is acknowledged. Integration does not make us saints. It makes us human. To be human is to hold opposites, kindness and cruelty, love and resentment, courage and fear. The conscious man is not pure, he is whole. He does not lie to himself about what he is capable of. He knows his limits, and therefore he can be trusted. Those who deny their darkness project it onto the world. They call others evil and themselves righteous. But the more one hunts the devil outside, the stronger he grows within. Civilization itself suffers from this blindness. Wars are fought not because men are evil, but because they cannot bear to see the evil in themselves. The shadow is not an enemy to be vanquished. It is a teacher to be listened to. Its lessons are hard but fair. It reveals the truths we would rather avoid, yet without them, we remain shallow. The man who befriends his shadow becomes compassionate, for he knows that others struggle with the same darkness he has faced in himself. When two people come together, their shadows meet before their words do. Much of what we call attraction or conflict comes from this meeting of hidden selves. The qualities we adore in another are often our own neglected virtues. The ones we cannot stand are our unrecognized flaws. To love fully is to accept both. In dreams, the shadow often appears as a stranger of the same sex, a rival, a brother, a threatening figure. If you meet him with violence, the dream turns to nightmare. But if you turn toward him and ask, "Who are you?" the dream changes. The stranger becomes guide. This is the moment when darkness begins to speak light. The shadow teaches humility. It reminds us that even at our best, we are still mixtures of heaven and earth. It pulls down false pride, but also lifts up the parts we have condemned. Through it, we learn mercy. For how can we judge another harshly after seeing the depths of our own nature? To master the shadow is not to conquer it, but to make peace with it. Each morning, I try to remember that there is something in me capable of both cruelty and kindness, deceit and truth. When I know this, I can choose more wisely. Awareness gives freedom. Denial gives fate. When a man finally looks upon his shadow and does not turn away, something miraculous happens. The energy that was bound in fear becomes creativity. The hatred becomes insight. The darkness once seen begins to shine from within like coal becoming diamond. This is why I say that the shadow, when faced, becomes light. It is no longer the enemy in the dark, but the fire that warms the heart. Without this fire, life remains flat, morality becomes dull, and love becomes fragile. But with it, one stands in the middle of contradiction and feels alive. The shadow makes the soul three-dimensional. It gives depth to light. So, do not fear your hidden self. Look upon it as the night sky looks upon the stars, as darkness that reveals illumination. Master it, not by chains, but by understanding. For every soul carries both the light of dawn and the silence of midnight, and wisdom lies in honoring both. In this way, the shadow ceases to rule from below. It becomes an ally, the keeper of instinct, passion, and truth. The man who walks with his shadow walks whole. His light no longer blinds, it guides. No man discovers himself in isolation. The soul needs reflection, and that reflection appears through others. From the moment we first open our eyes, we are met by a face, the gaze of the mother, the father, the friend, the beloved. In each of these mirrors, we begin to see who we are and who we are not. Relationship is not simply the meeting of two people, it is the meeting of two worlds of consciousness. Every person you love, every person you resent, reveals something of yourself. This is why I have said that the psychological task of relationship is not happiness, but revelation. We imagine that we love another person for who they are, but often we love them for the image of our own soul that they awaken. Likewise, when we hate someone, it is often because they embody what we cannot bear to face in ourselves. A man falls in love with a woman not merely because of her beauty, but because her presence stirs his own unlived depths. He sees in her a tenderness or a mystery that he once banished from himself. He believes she holds it. In truth, she reflects it. When he embraces her, he unconsciously reaches for his own forgotten soul. That is why love feels like coming home, because through the beloved, one returns to oneself. Yet this same mirror that reveals beauty also reveals shadow. The very qualities that enchant us in another will one day provoke us. The man who admired his lover's freedom will later call her unreliable. The woman who adored her, the partner's strength, will later resent his pride. The projection that once lit the heart with gold now darkens with disappointment. It is here that true relationship begins, when the dream breaks and two real souls stand face to face. Many flee at this threshold, mistaking the end of illusion for the end of love. But love does not end when projection dies, it begins. To love consciously is to see the other not as ideal, but as human, a soul with light and shadow, just like oneself. Only then can love mature from possession into communion. In analysis, I often witnessed how conflict between two people is rarely about the present moment. It is the resurfacing of ancient patterns, the child's cry for recognition, the parent's need for control, the lover's fear of abandonment. Each person carries into every bond the ghosts of those who came before. Until these ghosts are seen, they speak through us. Relationship is therefore not only companionship, but mirror. Through it, the psyche seeks completion. The friend who irritates you may embody the assertiveness you repress. The partner who frightens you may carry the passion you deny. The rival who humbles you may carry the courage you have not yet claimed. To see this requires humility, for it demands that we admit we are not finished beings. Often, we enter relationship hoping to be healed of our wounds, but the soul has a different aim. It brings us together not to erase our pain, but to make it visible. What the other awakens in us, longing, jealousy, dependence, are not their creations, but our own seeds being stirred to life. Relationship, therefore, is the stage upon which the drama of individuation unfolds. The unconscious uses love to make us whole. It hides the lost parts of ourselves in others so that we will seek them out. That is why love is both joyful and painful. Joyful when we touch those lost parts, painful when we realize they were never truly outside us. The task is not to love, claim the other as possession, but to reclaim the self through the encounter. In this sense, relationship is sacred alchemy. Two souls meet, each bearing the metals of their nature, pride, tenderness, fear, hope, and through the fire of affection and conflict, these elements are melted, mingled, purified. The vessel of this alchemy is daily life, the conversation, the argument, the silence shared after both have wept. When the heat of this process becomes too great, one may wish to escape. But the fire is not cruelty, it is transformation. In the furnace of love, impurities rise to the surface. We are shown how selfish we can be, how vulnerable, how afraid. It is humbling, but without humility, there can be no union. There are seasons in relationship, as in nature. In the spring, the souls meet in bloom, each showing its best colors. In the summer, warmth deepens into joy. In autumn, illusions fall away, revealing truth. And in winter, the bond must withstand cold, silence, fatigue, doubt. Those who endure winter discover that beneath the frost, roots intertwine. To master relationship is not to control others, but to see them clearly. The soul that sees clearly does not demand perfection. It understands that love is not the absence of fault, but the presence of understanding. Compassion arises when we recognize that the other's weakness is also our own. Every quarrel becomes a reminder of shared humanity. I once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This transformation is not gentle. It requires friction. Each person's edges must strike the other until sparks appear. These sparks are the light by which we see the truth. True relationship does not end when passion fades. Passion is the flame that begins the work. Love is the warmth that continues it. Mature love does not need constant excitement. It seeks depth, the quiet joy of two souls walking side by side, having forgiven each other for being human. And what of friendship? Friendship is a subtler form of the same mirror. A true friend sees both your shadow and your light and does not run from either. They remind you of your forgotten strengths and laugh at your self-deceptions. Friendship is a mirror polished by time. It reflects you clearly, without judgment, because it has learned your shape. Even our enemies are mirrors, though they show us in darker glass. The one who opposes you reveals what still lies unresolved within. If you meet hostility with hostility, you double the darkness. But if you look inward and ask, what part of me meets this with hatred? Then even conflict becomes a teacher. In every bond, the unconscious seeks dialogue. It asks, can you love without clinging? Can you see another's difference without fear? Can you give without losing yourself? These questions form the art of relationship. Few master it, for it requires continual death and rebirth, the letting go of illusion after illusion. But those who endure become capable of the greatest tenderness. I have found that when love is free of possession, it becomes radiant. Each partner begins to reflect not only the other, but the divine pattern that binds them both. They see that the love between them is not theirs alone, it is a movement of life itself. They become two windows through which the same light shines. When the day ends and one is alone again, the faces of those we have loved remain within. They have become inner figures, living presences in the psyche. The friend, the lover, the rival, the teacher, all dwell inside, whispering their wisdom, carrying their lessons. Relationship continues inwardly long after the outer form has passed. The mastery of relationship, then, lies in understanding that others are never merely others. They are the mirrors through which the self learns to see itself. To love another soul deeply is to open the gate to one's own depth. To forgive another is to reclaim a part of one's own lost innocence. Thus, every bond, even the painful one, serves a purpose in the great work of becoming. The man who has learned this no longer curses the people who hurt him. He thanks them, for they revealed what he needed to see. And the one who has been loved truly, even for a brief time, carries that light forever. When we master relationship, we no longer seek to possess or to be possessed. We meet each other freely, as two travelers who share the same path for a while. Each morning we greet, each evening we part, knowing that love is not a chain but a bridge leading always deeper into the mystery of the soul. So when you meet another friend, stranger or foe, remember that the psyche stands behind both faces. To meet them honestly, without projection, is to meet God in human form. For the divine hides in the ordinary, and relationship is its chosen mirror. Relationship is to master the art of reflection, to look upon another and see not just their face, but your own, and beyond that, the face of the self that unites you both. There comes a moment, after all the mirrors of love and conflict, when the soul can no longer bear to look outward for its image. It turns inward, not from disdain for the world, but from the quiet knowing that no one else can complete it. This turning is solitude, the sixth mastery, and perhaps the most misunderstood. Most people confuse solitude with loneliness. Loneliness is hunger, solitude is nourishment. Loneliness cries, "No one sees me." Solitude whispers, "I see myself." In loneliness, we wait for another to fill the emptiness. In solitude, we discover that the emptiness is alive, that it is the very space through which the soul speaks. I have often observed that a man who cannot be alone cannot love deeply. He clings to others not out of joy, but out of fear. He needs constant reflection because he does not trust the face he sees in silence. Such a man becomes restless when left to himself. His mind turns noisy, his hands reach for distraction. He believes this unrest proves that solitude is dangerous, when in truth, it proves only that he has never met himself. When we first enter solitude, the silence feels heavy. We hear the echoes of every neglected thought, every unhealed wound. The chatter of the outer world fades, and the voices of the inner one rise. They ask questions we have long avoided. Who are you when no one watches? What remains of you when the world forgets your name? At first, these questions sting, yet if we endure them, they open a door to freedom. Solitude is the great mirror, clearer than any relationship, for here the projection ceases. No lover to idealize, no rival to despise, no crowd to impress. In the absence of others, we meet our naked self, flawed, frightened, luminous. This meeting is the beginning of self-knowledge. Until one can endure oneself, one cannot truly endure another. It is within solitude that the fragments gathered from attention, speech, emotion, shadow, and relationship are woven into unity. The soul needs stillness to arrange its discoveries, as the body needs rest to heal its wounds. Many try to grow through endless activity, but growth is born in pause. Just as the field must lie fallow to renew its fertility, the psyche must have seasons of stillness. True solitude is not escape from life, but communion with it. When I walk alone in the forest, I do not feel apart from the world, I feel joined to it. The trees breathe the same air as I do. The water follows its ancient path whether or not I watch. Everything belongs, and in that belonging, I too am included. Solitude teaches that one is never truly separate from the whole, only distracted from it. The man who finds comfort in solitude ceases to demand that the world entertain him. He no longer depends on noise for meaning. He finds richness in small things, the shape of clouds, the rustle of leaves, the play of shadow on the wall. The more he looks, the more he realizes that life itself is endlessly speaking, and silence is the only ear that can hear it. I have often advised those who suffer from anxiety to spend time alone each day, not to brood, but to listen. Sit quietly without purpose, as one sits before a fire. Do not chase thoughts away, let them rise like smoke and fade. In time, the thoughts grow gentler, and behind them appears something still, a presence that watches but does not speak. This presence is the self. It reveals itself only in solitude. Solitude is the cradle of creativity. Every poem, discovery, and vision was first born in the mind of one who could bear to be alone. The artist, the mystic, the philosopher, all must descend into silence to draw from the depths. Yet solitude does not belong only to the gifted. Each soul, if it listens, can hear its own melody in quietness. People fear solitude because it exposes the falseness of their identity. In company, one wears masks: the friend, the lover, the worker, the believer. In solitude, those masks fall away. What remains is simple being, the I am, beneath all roles. This is frightening to the ego, which thrives on definitions, but to the soul, it is liberation. I recall a time when I too feared the emptiness of solitude. The silence pressed upon me like water on a diver. Only later did I understand that what I felt was not emptiness, but vastness, the immensity of being itself. The ego, accustomed to its smallness, trembles before this infinity. In solitude, one learns that meaning does not depend on activity. To simply exist is enough. The bird does not justify its song, the river does not prove its purpose. They are what they are. When we learn to be like them, simple, present, unstriving life becomes sacred again. We discover that holiness is not found in temples or words, but in the quiet pulse of existence itself. At times, solitude brings sorrow. There are days when the heart aches for a voice, a touch, a sign that one is not forgotten. But even this longing has value, for it reminds us that we are made for connection. Solitude does not abolish relationship, it purifies it. When we return to others after solitude, we bring presence instead of hunger, depth instead of demand. Solitude also teaches patience. In silence, time slows. The soul begins to move in its own rhythm, unhurried, circular. We learn that not everything can be solved or forced. The tree grows without anxiety, the seed germinates unseen. Likewise, the inner work unfolds in its own season. To wait in solitude is to trust that unseen processes are at work. There are dangers in solitude, of course. The one who retreats to avoid life rather than to know it may sink into despair. The one who confuses solitude with isolation may harden into pride. True solitude does not reject humanity, it embraces it more fully. The solitary knows that all beings share the same inwardness and therefore feels kinship even with strangers. When the man who has mastered solitude walks among people, he carries silence with him like a lamp. His presence calms those around him. He listens more than he speaks, observes more than he judges. Others sense in him a steadiness, as though he has touched something eternal and brought back its echo. In this stillness, faith begins to awaken. Faith is not belief in dogma, but trust in the invisible order that underlies life. The one who sits in solitude learns to feel this order directly. He begins to see that even the most random events carry meaning. The leaf falls where it must. The heart beats when it should. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is alone. In the end, solitude is not an act we perform, but a state we discover, the realization that beneath all the noise and striving, there is an unbroken continuity of being. To live from that center is to live from peace. Each morning, before I face the world, I spend a few moments alone, not to escape, but to remember. I listen for the quiet hum beneath thought. I let the mind rest and the soul rise. Then, whatever the day brings, praise or insult, joy or loss cannot touch that inner ground. Solitude, faithfully tended, becomes sanctuary. This is the gift of solitude, to know that one carries within a stillness that cannot be stolen. To master solitude is to discover that the company of the soul is enough, not as a denial of others, but as a foundation for loving them more truly. The man who has found peace in solitude fears neither silence nor crowd, neither love nor loss. He has met his own being, and in that meeting, he has found the source of all companionship. When the day ends and darkness returns, he sits again in quiet, not to escape the world, but to honor it. For solitude, like night, is not absence of light. It is the space in which light is born anew. And so, in learning to be alone, we learn to belong not just to others, but to life itself. When all other masteries have ripened, when attention has steadied, speech has become clear, emotion has been befriended, the shadow has been met, love has been purified, and solitude has been made sacred, there remains one last step, though it is not a step of doing, but of surrender. This is the mastery of faith. Faith is not belief. Belief clings to ideas, repeats phrases, and guards itself against doubt. Faith moves through doubt, as a bird moves through air. It is not built upon certainty, but upon trust, the quiet knowing that even when the world seems to fall apart, there is a hidden pattern that still holds. From my earliest work with dreams, I learned that the psyche possesses an intelligence deeper than the conscious mind. Its symbols arise without our command, its rhythms unfold with purpose. The same invisible wisdom that shapes the growth of trees shapes the unfolding of our inner life. Faith is the recognition of this order. It is the willingness to live in harmony with it, even when we cannot see its design. There are days when this faith feels impossible. The darkness thickens, the path disappears, and the voice of the soul falls silent. These are the nights of the spirit when meaning seems lost, and the mind cries out for reason. But it is precisely here, when reason fails, that faith begins, for faith is born not in the presence of light, but in its absence. We must remember that the light we seek is not always before the eyes, it lives in the act of seeing itself. When the outer light fades, the inner flame awakens. This is the secret of all renewal. The descent into darkness prepares the birth of new sight. Faith is this endurance, the trust that even when all is hidden, life is still at work within, the hiddenness. Many imagine that faith is obedience to authority, but true faith has nothing to do with submission to external law. It is loyalty to one's own inner experience of truth. It is the courage to stand alone with what one has seen and felt, even when the world denies it. The person of faith does not claim to know. He lives in reverence for what cannot be known. I have often observed that those who suffer most are called to the deepest faith. The loss, the illness, the betrayal, all tear away the illusions of control. They push the soul into the nakedness of being, where only trust remains. And from that surrender, something greater emerges, a peace not dependent on circumstance, a quiet acceptance that life, even in its cruelty, is mysteriously wise. Faith is the art of waiting without despair. The modern man despises waiting. He demands progress, evidence, reward. But the soul grows slowly, like a tree. The tree does not hurry to bear fruit. It deepens its roots through the seasons. In the same way, faith is the patience of the spirit, the knowledge that unseen roots are nourishing future blossoms. In alchemy, there is a stage called the nigredo, the blackening, when all seems lost. The substance breaks down, rots, dissolves. Only afterward comes the albedo, the whitening, when light returns. Faith is the willingness to let the old self die, knowing that decay is not the end, but the beginning of transformation. To live with faith is to accept paradox. The soul must hold opposites without collapsing into either. We believe and doubt, hope and despair, love and fear all at once. The conscious mind seeks resolution, but the deeper psyche thrives on tension. It is in this tension that the self, the image of wholeness, is born. Faith does not resolve contradiction, it abides within it. There is an ancient wisdom that says, where danger is, there grows also what saves. I have seen this proved countless times. A man on the edge of ruin discovers his calling. A woman in grief finds compassion for others she never knew she possessed. A loss that seemed unbearable becomes the turning point of a life. Faith is not blind optimism, it is recognition that meaning hides within suffering. When we can no longer trust the world, we are asked to trust the pattern. This pattern, invisible yet intimate, connects all things. The same breath moves through animal and man, through wind and spirit. The same rhythm that spins the stars beats within the human heart. To sense this unity is to glimpse eternity. Faith requires that we bow to mystery. It asks us to loosen the mind's grasp and let the unknown lead. The intellect resists this surrender. It wants definitions, but the soul moves in symbols, in feelings, in intuitions. Faith listens where thought cannot. It kneels before the sacred not as worshiper but as participant. In solitude, faith takes root. Alone with oneself, one begins to feel the hum of life beneath appearances. One senses that even pain has purpose, that even silence is full of sound. In these moments, the boundary between the self and the world grows thin. Faith is born not from doctrine, but from this direct experience of unity, the feeling that one is held by something vast, loving, and wise. The person of faith no longer demands that life be fair or gentle. He understands that the soul is not made for comfort, but for expansion. He no longer prays for the world to bend to his will. He prays for the strength to align with its hidden order. This alignment is the final stage of individuation, the merging of personal purpose with universal meaning. In dreams, faith often appears as light within darkness, a candle that refuses to go out, a distant star seen through storm. It is small, yet it is enough. The light does not eliminate the night, it gives it shape. So too, faith does not erase uncertainty, it illumines it just enough for the next step. We are not meant to see the whole path, only the next stone upon which to place the foot. faith also requires humility. We must accept that we are part of a story larger than ourselves, whose ending we cannot know. The ego demands control. Faith answers, trust the unfolding. To live this way is to live as nature lives, in rhythm, not in conquest. The flower does not fear the frost. It trusts that another spring will come. To the one who has mastered faith, life itself becomes prayer. Each breath becomes affirmation, each act an offering. The distinction between sacred and ordinary fades. To walk, to speak, to love, to suffer, all are forms of devotion when done with awareness. The one who lives this way no longer seeks heaven, for he carries heaven within. I have known moments in my life when faith was all that remained, when understanding failed and meaning seemed extinguished. Yet it was then, in the utter darkness, that I felt something still living beneath despair, a quiet pulse, an inner certainty that the psyche, like nature, knows its own way, to trust that rhythm, that is faith. And so, the seven masteries find their crown here. Attention awakens the mind. Speech aligns it with truth. Emotion gives it depth. The shadow grounds it in reality. Relationship opens it to love. Solitude restores it to the self, and faith unites it all, the invisible thread that binds every act, every thought, every breath to the whole. Faith does not promise peace as reward. It is peace itself. It is the still center within movement, the calm beneath the storm. When you live in faith, you no longer ask, will this end well? You simply live, trusting that whatever comes is part of the work. The day that begins in faith is never wasted. Each step, no matter how small, participates in the eternal pattern. The morning sun, the evening shadow, the laughter, and the tears all belong. The world ceases to be random. It becomes revelation. To master faith is not to master life, but to walk with it, to wake each morning knowing that the unseen is not empty, but full, to stand in uncertainty and still say yes. This yes is the final word of the soul. And when all other words fall silent, when attention fades, speech ceases, and even thought dissolves, that yes remains the quiet assent of being to itself, the whisper that created the world and continues to sustain it. That is faith, the quiet acceptance of the invisible order and the discovery that it has all along been you.